Happy Friday and welcome to a Take 10 live webinar. I'm Deb Barrett and with me is my partner in Soft Design Lab, Jackie. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Deb. Hi, everybody. So glad you're here with us today.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the new ethnics. For those of you that have been on some of the webinars before, we've alluded to a couple of motifs and patterns and things that we are seeing in the marketplace. So we wanted to tie it all together for you today. You know, whether it's camping or backpacking or five-star hotel, we know that our clients love to travel and they love an adventure. It really does run deep into our consumer behavior core. So when you come home, what we love to do is take all that inspiration we garnered from travel and keep the spirit going and infuse our house with the souvenirs from our journeys. And I think that's really what's driving the whole sort of new ethnic trend, whether it's Navajo-inspired pillows or wax prints from Africa and tinted doorways. That whole sort of new design aesthetic will really help motivate your clients to maybe redecorate this fall. Where this is sort of all coming from, and to kind of give you a frame of reference, is you know, for several years now, we've been in this sort of global eclectic, bohemia chic. There's lots of different names that are out there, and like all trends, that trend shifts a bit and it morphs. It kind of dies off and then it re-explodes. So it's really kind of important to know where things are coming from so that you can talk to it with your clients. So from this bohemia chic is what Jackie and I are calling it. Where it's going is it's taking two new pathways, one being Southwest or the new Southwest, and one being tribal. Modern nomad is another name that people are sort of assigning to it. A lot of this is coming from, you know, more interest in Central and South America, Africa, being bored with the whole sort of Mediterranean and Indian looks that we've seen, and moving on to, you know, chinoiserie, and then some of the things we're finding in Africa. So what goes around comes around. Southwest is also back. It's a more edited look. There's not a lot of terracotta floor tile, you know. There's not the kitschy coyote on the throw pillow, or it's really about taking some of those icons, updating it a bit, and then mixing in statement pieces, but again, editing it out. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not that pervasive look that you're talking about with saltillo tiles and all of that stuff. It's now such an eclectic mix.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's being used more as accents and that pop of color or texture in the room, just like Suzani's have been used for the past few years so pervasively across the board.
Right, exactly. So this happens to be an area. This was done by Commune Design. I alluded to them. You know, here's the iconography of Remember the Dreamcatcher, but collaged with, you know, some Keith Haring abstract, and you've got your Barcelona chair here, but you've got your Navajo rug. It's just really well done. And then here, and not really shabby chic, but you've got the throw on the bed, but you've got your runners and louvered, kind of this tented feeling that's going across these rooms here that covers up the windows, which is kind of interesting. It literally is just grommeted tent flat that opens up that window.
Right, and to me this is like modern teepee, you know? I mean, the way the bed is draped and the walls are draped, and then with those Southwestern accents, it's really kind of like a little teepee that they've put together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm thinking too that, you know, Austin, Texas is having such a creative impact now in the world, and I think a lot of this is coming from there as well.
The second path it's taking is this sort of what we're calling tribal, and it really comes from a different number of cultures. It's obviously from the, you know, Africa, the heart of Africa, but it's also about South America, Peru, Chile, Ecuador, Central America, Costa Rica, some of the, you know, whether it's Aztec or even Australia, Aborigine, New Zealand, you know, there's just a real big comeback this spring to this whole sort of tribal thing, even though we we've seen a lot of global influences from it, and it sort of transcends time. It's also having a moment.
You know, you see it in combinations, all different sort of cultural icons coming together in this melange of textures and patterns. And we talked about in our last Take 10 about how, you know, there are really no more rules to mixing and matching anymore. Anything goes. It's really just about the color, the texture, the scale, you know, of the pattern.
And stripes and geometrics, though, are definitely key in this trend. It's a little bit experimental, too, because, as you said, you can mix and match whatever you want. Or you can be really sophisticated and clean and minimalistic, as this is. So what are the hallmarks of both of these styles, both Southwest and Tribal? There's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of yin and yang, if you will. It's definitely about layering. It's about bringing those collections out that your clients put away. And it's about mixing, as you said, those different cultures. It's that accent piece that says Navajo, whether it's a rug, but it's mixed with, you know, all kinds of different things. And nature does play a point in here. Sometimes it can be kitschy, but sophisticated, if there's such a thing. I think you also mentioned it's also about being much bolder in scale and in color.
I think that really kind of is the key. I mean, when you have like a neutral background or something like we just saw in that one shot, to really bring things into scale and balance. And, you know, it's all about repetition because it's stripes and it's geometric patterns. And so there's a lot of, you know, repeating patterns, but then the colors really break it up. To me, it has a lot of rhythm, adds a lot of movement to the room.
So when you are, whether you're going to work in Southwest or you're going to work in Tribal, the whole idea is to focus on the color palette here too, along with the scale. This happens to be a room that we saw last year in Paris, and it was all African influenced, but again, there were these bright indigo blue spaces that were showing off the artwork, and it was color blocking and it was pattern. I mean, there was just so much going on in this room, but it was just really well done. So you can see you're going to get what we used to call the jewel tones in the 70s, wood tones, obviously, indigos, purples, this wonderful sort of rich camel brown. It's not, you know, it's not muddy on the dark side and the moody side of the palette. And certainly, you know, black and white makes a statement no matter what, whether you're wearing it on the runway and in putting it in your closet or you're, you know, putting it in home decor.
You know, last time about this sort of menswear trend, and that's where this sort of fits in because it's a feminized masculinity that this has to it because the patterns are very graceful and a lot of the colors are sinuous and they sort of fade in and out like tie-dye and things like that, but then it's sort of in this dark, manly colorway, which is so different from the traditional Southwest we remember. So for me, I think this is like a really awesome, like very kind of sexy look for a room.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sort of soft ruggedness, if you will.
Right.
You know, then it also goes to happy. You know, that sort of exuberance is there. This happens to be Pinecone Hill. And then against this black and white wallpaper, I love this mix of pillows and this mola that's on the bench. And the same poof that we just saw in black, do it in hot pink.
Now, this is like accents, pops of color, pops of texture. Throw it into your existing decor.
Color palette here, I mean, shocking pink walls. So you're, again, in those bright and happy colors when you're on the exuberant side of the palette. Now, when it comes to fabrics and patterns, that's also a key touch point to both trends. It's about tribal patterns, true reinvented, true authentic tribal patterns. Batiks give you that ombre feel to it, resist looks, and all coming out of some of the Suzanis and Icots that we've seen in the past. It's all about taking these sort of global textures, textiles, and letting them take on this regional flavor. So where's the fabric and patterns coming from in this trend? Well, you know, we've been in this sort of fret and lattice mode in the last 2.5 or 3 years, and now that it's basically peaking and actually in some cases pieces on the downside. Then it's moved into the chevron, taking one of the elements and redoing it graphically. Where it's moving is into this Aztec look. It's really interesting. It's these horizontal layering of one geometric element, like a triangle, like a line, and repeating it ad nauseam, until to get that look.
And we're seeing it mixed up in all different types of patterns, but definitely in a railroaded stripe.
We're also seeing it coming out of, as you mentioned earlier, Suzani's. They were top of mind. They started when this whole global eclectic look became so popular. Then it moved into the iCots, and where it's going is it's moving into this whole sort of Navajo feel, and Pendleton blankets. As I mentioned, you can buy their fabric by the yard. You can buy the blankets, buying one throw or one blanket and throwing it over your couch and helping get that look.
Well, and that's exactly what we did when we went out and bought our antique Suzani's and threw it over the sofa. That's how it starts, right?
Right. Or buy a yard and a half and create a poof or whatever out of. Here's how it's sort of also morphing. This is actually some of the geometric Southwest looks that we saw at market, both in Atlanta and Vegas. This is Loli, Sophia. There's up at the top, these are some West Elm rugs that are actually inspired by the Museum of Indian Art in Santa Fe that West Elm is introducing. So you can definitely see that it's going to be hitting the marketplace this fall.
And the West Elm, I think, is a great example, too, of how they're modifying those patterns a little bit, simplifying them a little bit to make it more palatable.
It also is a bit subdued. Don't think Indian blanket and crazy themes and kitschy looks in Southwest. It can be very sophisticated. On the left, this is a Schumacher collection called Lux Lodge, and it's a reversible wool, and it reverses from a chevron to a window pane check, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous line. It's one of my favorite collections in there because this works in any room. And it also speaks, as Jackie mentioned, to this whole sort of masculine idea of it. But don't overlook denims and houndstooth checks and burlap. How much burlap have we seen in that whole sort of restoration hardware look, right? Paisleys, florals and checks and stripes, Ralph Lauren, American Country, Southwest, there you go. And so florals are definitely peaking. I'll predict that I'm thinking that we're going to see more fruits and veggies, which is also an outgrowth in pattern from both of these tribal and Southwest looks. This happens to be another West Elm shot, and I think this speaks perfectly what Jackie just said. It's like, here's that chevron rug we just talked about, and this is how they've just cleaned it up and made it hip.
Right. It's all about pattern, rhythm, all of those basic design concepts sort of rolled into one package.
Then on tribal, when it comes to pattern, it's really coming out of what was happening with the whole sort of Dutch West Indies and going back and, to these wax resist prints that are very African, regionalism, batiks. These look like these were done on velvet or panne velvet that are kind of interesting and a little bit more luxe, if you will. Here, this also sort of says chevron, doesn't it, on the left? But just done more three-dimensionally, these kind of tribal prints. Molas, if you're talking Central and South America, you've got your Mexican blanket kind of ideas with the serape stripes. These are otomis. These are actually applique. And I have to tell you, I swiped this pillow off of One Kings Lane today. It's part of one of their flash sales for today. So I had to put it in because I thought, you know what? It's just of the moment that we're talking.
I think accents and, pops of color with this and not, it doesn't have to be immersive. You don't have to go hang piñatas from the ceiling.
It's all about stripes, triangles, diamonds, zigzags, but done simply, because then it'll be seamless and flawless in the room. But think of them like, you could see one of these framed as art, wall hangings. And that's something that is also another sort of subdirection that's happening in a lot of different trends, is we're starting to see textiles coming back onto the walls.
I totally agree with that. What a perfect thing to be able to offer wall hanging, and you're just using this great fabric. Add some fringe or whatever, and a great pull and rod, and you've got a work of art on your wall.
And when in doubt, look at the catwalk or in your closet. Here, some of that tribal inspired fashion that's coming off the catwalks and Christian Louis Vuittons. So bring it into your room. Look at that sequin skirt. Awesome.
I think that's such a great example, too, of this very traditional pattern, Navajo pattern, American Indian pattern, but then putting those sequins on it really brings it a whole different look. I think we're going to be seeing those patterns embroidered, and like we saw the one velvet pillow, just giving a richness to what is usually a very rough pattern that would have been on a rough blanket or whatever. So polishing it almost.
And the one on the left really speaks to how to do texture well, or into this whole, this is a fezzy rug. I love these overlays on this sort of ikat ombre batik background to Loli, which is, it says Missoni, but it could also say this sort of Aztec feel that you have for these rugs. And on the left, I know this is a rug, but if you look in Pottery Barn's catalog, they have a new collection of decorative accent pillows that have this same feel where they've taken a pattern and then they've done this. It's not really an applique because it's digitally printed, but they've overlaid these sort of pattern onto pattern. It can also be sophisticated, a bit more toned down, a bit more subdued. So if your client isn't about color, we've shown you these frayed looks before, but they definitely say tribal also. Here, Andrew Mart and then Pierre Frey, which you and I both love. This kind of reads Moroccan, but there's a lot of Southwestern and tribal influences in that.
It's a good way to see how you can blend those two. So if you've got some of the stuff that we've been using, Suzanis and ICATs and things like that, they blend really well with it.
To get the look, it's really all about embracing sort of the twists of these motifs that we've been talking about that are those transcend time and are honored. Whether it's an area rug, whether it's an influenced print from Aztecs or Central America. But again, if in doubt, put in that pop of color so that there's that common thread and everything is tied together. And then make sure that you also create that backdrop, because if you're going to put these kinds of accents into the room to talk and speak to the trend, you want to make sure that the backdrop in the room shows them off. These are arrows. Aren't they fun? I mean, so again, instead of putting flowers in a vase, get a really big tall vase and stick in some of those. Could be a really sophisticated look.
I agree totally.
This is actually a lacquered and gold leaf antler on the bottom in the red. And then I love this for trim and tassels. That's why I originally took this picture, is they took this antler, shed antler, and they tied it up with cording and tassels and kind of hung it. Again, wall art, if you will.
Yeah, and in the right room, a couple of antlers as a drapery rod. I mean, I think that would be really very cool, or with a really great wall hanging, using antlers like that as a device to hang it.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's so cool. Some looks that we saw at market that you can purchase is obviously, nail heads are a big part of Southwest, whether they're hammered or whether they're on textiles or on upholstery and furniture. And then these wonderful embroidered pillows really speak to that whole sort of trend. But again, look at the texture. The texture's the best part of it.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is very three-dimensional. A lot of over-stitching, a lot of crewel embroidery being used to make the motifs, a lot of applique and stuff.
By the way, this is a hide patchwork rug, but look at you're talking about mix of furniture, clean lines, simple, but it all works because of the statement, the two elephant statement pieces, and then this wonderful funky chair over here in sheepskin.
I normally would not like a room with giant elephants on the wall.
No, but somehow it does work, doesn't it?
It's really incredible.
Part of it is obviously hide, and so to get that look, a source that I love that you might not be familiar with. Now, rug on the bottom here on the left is actually dyed hair on hide rug that's been pieced together, as well as the chevron one. And both of these rugs are by an Austin designer and artist called Kyle Bunting. And if you haven't seen his rugs, oh my gosh, they are amazing. Well, you can see the depth and breadth from, neon chevron to very traditional cut and pieced. And then he also does a lot of metallic looks. He just does really interesting things. So that would be a source that I would, if you want to work in this and play in this trend, is to look at Kyle Bunting, and maybe you'll probably find knockoffs also out there because he is a bit on the high end. but it makes a
But look at
statement.
that color. I mean, that color is fantastic.
Isn't that amazing? And it's high,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
another thing.
And
Or
again,
it's like,
that
doing, I
texture
mean,
too.
great mix in this. Throw that buffalo
Hmm.
fur on that bed, right? Here's some other things that you can do. From that icot to that chevron to that Aztec look, it's almost starting to morph into, here's the sofa, I think that's Urban Outfitters, into flame stitching. We haven't seen the flame
Right.
stitch pattern for a long time. We might see it coming back. And these are some pieces you saw at Andrew Martin and at Surya, right? These are great.
Yeah, and again, just that sort of melange of textures and mix of cultures coming together. A lot of nail heads, we talked about in our last Big Ten, and just really having it front and center with the pattern and these big, bold pieces of furniture with these big, bold patterns on them. And the colors then are a little bit more muted, which another way to go with this. If you don't want a really super colorful thing and you're not ready for the super sophisticated, there's a middle ground.
Like this. This is a great middle ground.
Yeah,
And
and that looks like the bed that you showed earlier. It's still very sophisticated, but they're basically a Navajo blanket and a denim throw.
I love this striping of the on that chair. As I
This
said
is the
before.
more like sophisticated, the sophisticated vein. And again, there's a cow hide rug
Right.
on the floor there.
Yep.
So that's definitely mixing those two together.
Here's the new line of Pendleton blankets and bedding that's out there, another source that you might want to look into that you might not have been aware of or fell off your radar. And then it also can go high end. This is Noblesse. These are embroidered wool fabrics that they did into these really simple grommet tops with that plaid or large check up there. It could be lacing and blanking stitches down the leading edges, fringes, wrought iron, wood. But what I like about that is, the literal thing is a wrought iron drapery rod. This is the brushed metal, more contemporary. So I love the mix there.
Oh yeah, and I love the wood paneling behind it.
Isn't that great?
Stained blue in such a very rich, very expensive, high end, but then with this sort of barn wood wall, but that super bright blue just gives it a whole different dimension.
This sort of says, I just came out of Africa. I'll have to dig that movie out for inspiration over the weekend. But the whole idea being here, I think one key point that we would give you as a key takeaway is don't opt for just one of these styles. The whole idea is to vary it up, because it won't work if you don't. It'll just look like you tried too hard to do a theme room. Well, that's, I think, it for this week. Okay, guys, have a great weekend. See you next time.
Thanks so much. Bye.